Hello there, people. Welcome back to my channel. And today I wanted to try to do a little buyer's guide on the Ford Sierra RS Cosworth. Maybe not a buyer's guide, but at least a little heads-up guide to give you a little insight of what to look out for when going out to buying one of these awesome classic Fords. There are quite a lot of common issues on these cars. They are quite old now, so there is a lot of faults just having to do with the age of the car. So it is somewhat an impossible task to give you like a complete guide to what to look out for, because basically you should check the whole car thoroughly with a magnifying glass, actually, especially if you're after the originality and crash damage and all that stuff. You really should spend quite many hours with the car before deciding if you're gonna buy one. But I wanted to concentrate on some of the common issues at least. So that is a possible thing to do. One thing I'm not going to talk too much about, though, is the history of the cars. Another thing would be what type of car you should buy. I'm not the guy who's going to say, well, you should buy a tuned car or you should buy a standard car, because that is a very personal preference. But my personal opinion, if I can say that would be like, I think you are better off going after a standard car. And when I'm talking about standard and tuning stuff, I'm talking about like horsepower figures, for the most part at least. I'm not the guy either that owns a car like this because of it being a valuable car and I'm gonna make money from selling it. But it is always in the back of your mind that the stuff and the work you do to a car may pay off in the end, but the most important thing is what you get out of it personally, in a way. And that is where it comes into play what I did to this car. This car, particular one, used to feature a monster engine, 640 wheel horsepower. I didn't want to have a car like that, basically, or mostly because it is not easy to maintain a car like that, and it's not even legal to run that kind of horsepower without it being like approved in a certain way and stuff like that. Even though they're turning old, or they're getting older now, so it is easier, but still. The number one reason is that I want to experience how these cars were to drive and how they were out of the factory. So that is what I wanted to achieve with this car. It is to bring it back to standard horsepower figures, standard driveline, and just being able to relive how it would have been like to own one of these cars back in 1986 when they were released. So I'm not going to say too much about the tuning thing, but one thing that I have to say though is if you choose a tuned one, you have to do a proper check on the car, because you can risk getting a bad tuned car, you can risk getting a good tuned car, and the same goes with the standard ones. You can risk getting a good and bad of a standard car also. So what matters is to find out the general and current condition of the car and make your decision based upon your findings, basically. So I think we should go ahead and at least agree on a couple of things that you should check out before you pull the trigger and buying one of these lovely Ford Sierra RS Cosworth cars. So I think we can agree on a couple of areas that is important. Number one would be to verify that it is actually a genuine Cosworth Sierra with a Cosworth VIN number. The next thing would be to clarify how much rust is it on, or how much rust is there on the car, the chassis, the body, doors, tailgate, and all that stuff. The other thing would be like the reliability, say both the engine and like the electronics or electrics and driveline, but also maybe throw in that crash history and service history. So I think we should just get on with it and have a little look at least how my VIN number or the VIN number on my car looks like, because this is a genuine Sierra RS Cosworth, and there are a couple of things that you should pay attention to when checking the VIN number. Even though I'm not an expert in deciphering these VIN numbers, I just want to show you what to look for, like loosely in a way. But please dig into this more if you're actually going out buying one. One of the first things is you should separate this VIN number into two pieces. The first four, WFOE, that should be the first letterings or the writing in the VIN number of a Sierra Cosworth. The two X's, they're kind of just generic, they're just there. The next part of the VIN number is GBBE, and that is your Cosworth telltale sign in a way. And GA, that stands for production year and production month. This is supposedly an 87, but as far as I remember, G stands for 86 and A is November. So it might have been a late November car and sold in January 87, making it an 87 model. Also, you have a couple of telltale signs on the side here. It says engine N5, that is the engine code for the Cosworth YB engine. You also have drive condition A and transmission J. I think that means two-wheel drive and Borg-Warner T5, if I remember correctly. Don't arrest me on it if I'm mistaken. Also, you have a little color code here. The K stands for Moonstone Blue, and the 6 I do think is either the interior or it is the shade of the color of the Moonstone Blue. You also have a separate VIN plate or a second VIN plate. It isn't exactly a VIN plate, but it's more like an equipment plate, I think. The VIN number is also found here, at least the last half of it, and it should match up this one with the one on the VIN plate. It also says BBE, GA, and the serial number behind there. The serial number is also found on the engine block, but then you have to remove the timing belt cover and have a peek at the front end of the engine block there. On my car here, this engine is not the original to the car, so that would not match up with these last numbers in the serial number. So after you did that check here, you have to write that down back on your ear and take your ear with you. I'm sorry for the babbling here. And pull up this little plastic flap in the carpet, and there you should see a VIN number. And there's a lot of talk about these VIN numbers being stamped from the outside and inwards or from the inside and outwards. And what I found is that both of these are the genuine way of seeing a VIN number stamped. So, but people are always going to argue that the one way is better or more genuine than the other way. But as long as you do verify this one to the VIN plate and also lift up the carpet to check out if you see any welding repairs done in this area, you should be good to go. If you do not find any welding work, that is. If you do pay some more attention to the VIN number and do your proper checks to find out if it is a genuine car or not. So, with the VIN number thing aside, I think we should talk a bit about the rust issues that can be found on these cars. This is an old Ford Sierra. You have to remember that. It can basically rust anywhere. So, but I just have to point out some common areas for these to rust out. And that is basically the battery area, which is supposed to be here. My battery has been removed back in the car. So, but usually you find a battery plate here with obviously a battery on top. Do inspect the battery plate, maybe even remove the battery to see how this plate looks like. Also in the corner here, make sure you check all the panels here as good as you can. They often rust out back there. And also around the front strut towers, usually rust between that plate and that plate on these spot welds here. Also, you can verify if the front wings have been replaced at some point by checking out if the car has this body sealant put on here. This is the way it should look like if the panels have not been replaced, or if it at least have been replaced properly by, say, at a Ford dealership back in the day. They should have put this on, I do reckon. Also, you have some serial number thingies going on here, which is supposedly a telltale sign if it is a genuine panel or not. At least that's what I've gathered of information. Same here, it's somewhat of a serial number. Also, when you're at it, at the rust thing, do check out how it looks like under the brake booster and stuff. Maybe someone spilled brake fluid at some point in the car's life and it started to rust out on the frame rails down there. So do a proper check there, people. Also, the front wheel arches and extenders, make sure you do a nice visual here. Also, the arches often have been cut to accommodate for bigger wheels. So that is pretty common to see. So just do a proper check there. And also in the back here, this is where my car has the most severe rust, and that is under the infamous boot lid seal. This is basically rusting out because of the design of the fastening lip here. It's an inner part and an outer part, and they're spot welded together, and after some time there will be water collecting between these two plates and it starts to rust out. So do make sure that you pull the boot lid seal here to have a little peek on the underside here. And while you're back here, you should pull the carpet to see a spare wheel sitting here in the spare wheel well. But on my car, my battery is mounted here. And you should also pull up this sponge material to have a peek at the actual floor on the car and check the spot welds here. This is the spot welds for the rear chassis legs, often rusting out here. And you can often see it through this sound deadening material here. Also in the back, this frame here in a way. And this makes for a good time to check also the rear lighting, to check the wiring harness. Maybe just an all-round good inspection in the back here. Oh yeah, you have to see this, people. Check this out. This is a genuine Ford Sierra vest that my father got from the dealer when he bought his Ford Sierra 2.3 Gia brand new back in 1985. So this is staying in the car as a reminder of my dad, who sadly passed away earlier this year. So very nice to have this laying here, even though I don't think I'm gonna wear it because it kind of looks very 80s, trust me. But that's pretty cool, isn't it? Also, it's a good time to check the rear parcel shelf here. This is often sagging like hell in the middle, so make sure it's as straight as it can be, because sourcing these on the aftermarket is not easy, and if you find them, they're either in bad condition and very, very expensive, like many other parts on these Ford Sierras. When it comes to also some rusty doors, you have to check the doors on the underside here, very important. And also move the sunroof back so you can have a look at the drains in the roof here. Also there's a body sealant or body sealer around or straight with the panel here. Just give a proper visual down here to see if you can spot any rust. The last thing I want to mention is like panel gaps. These chassis on the Ford Sierras are known to be soft as a lettuce in a way. So seeing panel gaps that are off shouldn't worry you too much, but you should check it, of course, to see if it's like super bad on one side and perfect on the other side, just so you know at least. So yeah. Also, when it comes to the outside, we can mention the headlights and stuff. I think that is pretty important, and it's a very often forgotten item to check. These genuine items were made by CB/Vallejo, I think, and they're hard to come by in good condition and also very expensive to get hold of if you find them at all. And there's a lot of, or at least some aftermarket versions, but the quality on those are pretty much crap. Also, the side turn or the turn signals, pretty common and easy to get hold of. On the 3-door, you would see a fog light here, but on the RS500 ones, they did put some grills in here to accommodate or to allow more air coming into the brakes, I think, basically. So I do have the grills there. So that was all for the body. I will do some more rust talk when we take the car up in the air, but now I just want to talk about this engine. And this is the famous Cosworth YB engine. It's a 2-liter, 4-cylinder, 16-valve double overhead cam turbo engine, and it's just an aesthetically pleasing engine to look at, and a lot of people actually do make some coffee tables and stuff, putting a glass plate on top, and just because it looks so friggin' awesome. And I definitely agree. I do love the way this looks. It looks like a beast of an engine, and when considering this was released back in '86, having 204 horsepower, that was a lot. And they're also very easily tunable. So, but that's up to you if you do want to tune it. You have to remember it's still an old engine, and now these days they're not that easy to. You can always get parts for these, but still you can risk getting an engine with a lot of poor threads, and maybe that's cracked, and so you should be careful. Some common issues with these is talked about all over the interwebs, so I'm not sure if I'm going to say too much about it, really. But for the most part, you're talking about like poor turbos, head gaskets, cooling problems, and maybe rough running, like misfiring and stuff like that. And it has to do with basically a lot of poor wiring these days. So seeing an upgraded wiring, like on my car here, is a good thing. And you would also have to check like some connectors, just unplug them to see how they look like inside, and just get a feel on how the wiring feels like. This wiring loom I got from Auto Dynamics from the UK. James Wills, fantastic dude, very kind and very helpful if you need help when you're installing a wiring harness like this. It's very easy, but still he was kind to help me out when I needed any advice to fitting this. So anyways, poor turbos would be a very common thing. Blue smoke from the exhaust, same as with valve guide stem seals, and poor piston rings, also like blue smoke thingy. Black smoke would be like overfueling, rich condition, misfiring and stuff. So, and white smoke would indicate somewhat of a poor head gasket, or at least a cooling problem. So with all these faults in mind, it is super important to do a cold startup. That is my number one tip above anything when it comes to engine and electrics and stuff like that. It is just so critical, because you do experience then how the car is from when it's cold through the startup phase and heating up phase or heat up phase, or the heat cycle, until it also gets hot, and you will experience hopefully that the cooling fans are coming on. And if they do not come on, you most likely would have a very common issue that is often traced back to the well-known fuse box of the old Ford. The cooling fan electrics on these cars are notoriously bad. They used to feature a one fuse and one relay system controlling a twin cooling fan setup, and when they're now getting this old, you will risk seeing like burnt fuse holders because of excessive resistance, which leads to excessive heat, and you have a melted fuse. So do remove this cover and check out every relay and every fuse. Maybe even bring a power probe or a test lamp to see that there's power on every fuse, and also do pull some relays to check out the condition under the relays. There's rebuild kits for these cooling fan looms and also the fuel pump looms, and I've installed this twin relay setup for the cooling fans, and it looks like this, and I hid it in here in the auxiliary fuse box because my car also have, like they said, the aftermarket wiring loom, so the fuel pump relay and stuff have been removed from here and into the car as an uprated thing. So I've installed the cooling fan system in here, and it looks very neat. So now it uses 2 relays and 2 30 amp fuses to run these 2 massive cooling fans. So one thing I have to say also is that it is very common to hear piston slap on these 2-wheel drive engines. And I think I will just show you what Ford writes about that particular subject. So here we are. This is the supplementary manual, and let me just read it out for you. To ensure long life at high power output, your engine is fitted with forged pistons. On initial startup with the cold engine, some piston noise, aka piston slap, may be detected. This is not detrimental to the life of the engine. That is pretty cool that they put that in there, and that is to somewhat just tell you that it is just the nature of the beast with a forged piston, that the tolerances are larger when a cold engine is started, and up till it gets hot, the tolerances are like they should be, and the piston slap should go away. So it is very important to do the cold startup all the way to the car is up to driving temperature, to check for misfires and excessive sounds coming from the engine. When it comes to other stuff on these, it's pretty common to see oil leaks. They have very poor fitments or tolerances. In a way, it's an old engine, so seeing these engines leaking oil is pretty common, but it can be done to make this engine oil leak free if you put a bit of extra effort in, if you're building an engine like that or like this. So cam cover seals, camshaft sealing rings, crank seals, both front and rear, and also obviously thermostat leaks, water pump down there. So just use your eyes and do a proper visual inspection, and combine that with your cold startup and the test drive to verify if it does run like it should. They should run smoothly. There shouldn't be any pops and bangs really, and it should just drive very well like basically any other car, apart from it being friggin' awesome to drive. So I think we should then move into the car here to have a look at the interior, which I find to be awesome. It's very plasticky, I have to admit that, but I think the design of the instrument or the dashboard is very, very period correct, and it just is because of its nature. It is basically from back in the day, but it's very driver oriented, you know, and it just works. It's very functional. So when you're in here, it is a nice place to be. One thing that you have to do when you get in here is to check that everything works. There's not a lot of stuff in here, so that is pretty basic. But what you have to do is turn on the ignition, check that the ABS light goes out like that. It's the yellow one and the red icon down there. And if that goes out like this, that means that there's no permanent fault in the ABS system. And it's not unusual to see that the ABS light comes on when you're starting to drive. And it does that in my car. And what happened in my case here is that there is wheel bearing grease coming onto the ABS sensor rings and interfering with the readings that the ABS sensor is doing, and then again setting on the ABS light because it is sensing the wrong wheel speed. If the ABS light does not go out when turning on the ignition like that and it just stays on, that means that you have a permanent fault in the system, meaning a pressure sensor, an ABS pump, or even an ABS unit sitting under the dashboard here. So that would involve a bit more fault finding to find out, but anywho, that's just a little tip of what you can expect seeing. Also, just check the ambient lighting here. You have like a variable resistor here. Also, the 3-door has a boost gauge on top there, which is friggin' awesome. On the side here, you have a lot of warning lights, pad wear, coolant level, washer fluid level, fuel level, and an ECU warning light if the engine management system sitting there detects a fault in the system. And also you have the iconic top view of the car, which shows open doors, bad bulbs, front and rear, and also the lovely snowflake symbol on top, which has a 2-step function. It shows a yellow snowflake if it's between 3 and 0 degrees Celsius, and a red snowflake if it's below freezing or below 0. Also, you have a clock here with the date setting and a fantastic stopwatch in seconds only, which kind of rules. So it makes some easy 0 to 60 times, and they always run at around 6 seconds. So, and again, the ECU is sitting here behind this lovely dashboard cover with the RS logo. And this is a level 1 unit with a yellow CO adjustment screw there. The Sapphire ones had an L6 or a level 6 unit, which had a white adjustment screw there. Also, before we go, you should check these switches here. These are for the fog lights front, fog light rear, heated rear window, and also remember to check the fan, the cooling fan or the heater blower, to check that that works, so you don't have to replace that just while you are getting a new car. So yeah. And also electrical windows if your car has one, or if the car you're looking at has one or has electrical windows, do check them. So let's talk about the interior parts now. So the seats you can see here is the iconic lovely Recaro seats. They're known to be one of the best seats you can sit in, and you have my word, these are one of the most awesome seats I've ever sat in, and I just remember that from when I got my first Cosworth back in the day. I remember these seats, they're so friggin' awesome. So you want to make sure that the side bolstering is good, that it has some good resistance in it. The same on the seat also. And just make sure that the fabric is somewhat complete, that there's no holes. They often tear a hole here. And you can see my seat here is pretty good condition. It doesn't have a hole here yet, at least. Also, the door cards are a very known issue, or the known issue with the good door cards is that the vinyl loosens up. Here you can see it started to happen here also, but often you can see it like completely broken here. So these are very expensive to get hold of, and even more hard to get hold of in good condition. So make sure you do check these. It may sound trivial, but it is important if you're after a nice condition car. The same goes with the panels in the back. They also do the same. They loosen up in the vinyl. And the back seat arrangement is pretty cool. You have a 30-70 or a 60-40 split in the rear seat here. So you can pull up this seat and you can fold down the backrest. so you will have a larger luggage capacity if you're using your Sierra as a daily. Also make sure you check the roof lining. They often do sag quite a lot, like it did in this car, but I was lucky to have a good friend that helped me out redoing this roof liner here, or ceiling. Also, the Sierras do often come with a sunroof, and that should work smoothly. They have a tilt function like that, and this makes it able, or makes you able to check the top end for rust here, and you also can take it down like this. And this one is lubricated by me, so it is perfectly smooth. I also restored the frame here. These are often rusting out, so do check this one, this metal frame here, because finding one for the 3-door, which has this bronze tint on the glass, is not easy. So do give the sunroof an extra check when checking out this car that you might be buying. Also, the interior lighting is somewhat trivial, but again, very important to check, I think. So now when you have opened up the sunroof, you can do this inspection in the drains here to check if they're actually open, and also that there's not a lot of rust around here. So now I think we should take the car up in the air and have a little inspection on the underside to reveal if there's any rust issues on this car. So before we go ahead, you have to check the steering. So you do your standard 9 and 3 o'clock wiggle on the wheel to check for excessive wear in the steering rack or tie rod ends. And also you can do 12 and 6 o'clock to check the wheel bearings, and also make sure that the wheel is spinning freely, so you know if you have a sticking caliper. These have 4-piston calipers, and the pistons often seize inside. There's a lot of rebuild kits out there, so it isn't a big issue in that sense, but you really don't want to deal with that. So it also does cost a bit of money to get these calipers redone. Also, a good time is to check the suspension setup. This is a Bilstein shock and an ABAC spring setup, which I find to be a bit on the stiff side for my liking at least. So I'm after a bit softer setup for my car. And here we have the car up in the air, and it's the last leg of this inspection. And the biggest and most important thing to check here is rusty chassis legs. They're notorious for rusting out, especially in the main mount here, but do check the complete chassis leg all the way up here to the spring mount, often rust out around there. Also on every panel that's welded on is very important to check. These are the rear chassis legs. These are a bit thinner, so they rust out even easier in a way. And also this back frame here, and all the way on this side to the chassis leg on this side. Just check if a rust. Do this inspection properly. And also the sills, you know, it's a Ford, so it's very common to see rusty sills. So just make sure you know the condition at least. And while we're here, if you see this, you don't have to worry. This is somewhat of a tamper-proof seal that is put over the VIN number, so it will let you know if the car has been tampered with or not. At least I think that is why it's there. It can be obviously to prevent the VIN number from rusting also, but I think basically it is somewhat of a tamper-proof seal. So if you see this, don't worry, this is how it's supposed to be. Also up front here, you will risk seeing smashed up jacking points like this. And with these being so destroyed already, that's why I still lift up my car here. But you should lift it up here to prevent this from happening. These can often also rust out, so make sure you check this area of the floor. The other thing I just have to say about the suspension is that you should check the rear trailing arms. It's very common to see people putting in polyurethane bushings on these cars. But if you see polyurethane bushings here, That is a fail. That means that the owner did not know what he was doing, because the original bushings in the back here are spherical bearings, like spherical metal bearings. And so it's a complete downgrading if you see polyurethane bushings here. So do check that one to make sure you have these metal spherical bearings. If you see polyurethane bushings any other place on the car, well, that's up to you. I think it just provides a too stiff of a ride, especially if you are running the car on the street. But that, again, is a very personal preference in a way. If you do like a stiff ride, well, go ahead. Put coilovers and polyurethane bushings all over, and you'll be happy at least, and that is fine. The other thing you see here is an OE spec exhaust system, which is very rare to see on these cars because people usually put on 3-inch exhaust system like stainless steel Mongoose and Scorpion systems, which is fine. They do make a very nice sound, but to me personally, I enjoy the sound that this original type system brings when you're driving. It does give you a very nice exhaust note, and you can also hear this being a turbo car, which is a big part of this car. It is a turbo car, and it's known for being that. So, and yeah, obviously this doesn't make as much sound as the 3-inch, so maybe most people will say, oh, it doesn't make any sound and blah, 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 but I think this does give the Cosworth sound that particular Cosworth sound, even though I think also I can agree that the 3-inch systems is a very like typical Ford Cosworth sound also. You can hear when a Cosworth is coming down the road if it has these 3-inch systems. But anyways, it's a personal preference. I enjoy this original system. It doesn't make too much noise, and it does give a nice sound to the car. Driveline, here is the gearbox. It's a Borg-Warner T5. Very strong unit when it's in good condition, but they do have some wear issues with synchronizers and poor 3rd and 5th gear. The reverse is a non-synchronized one, so you will hear like a when you put it in reverse, which is completely normal. But you should experience a nice shift on these gearboxes, because they're known for being one of the most fantastic gearboxes out there when it comes to shift quality, even though they can suffer from these problems that I just mentioned. The differential is a 7.5-inch limited slip differential with 108mm out drives, and these are also somewhat of a bulletproof item, but because of them being old and they've maybe been abused over the years, you can hear clunking and whiny bearing sounds coming from them. So just make sure that you test drive the car again to see how the driveline performs. And that leaves me to say something about the front end. Now you're here to check for oil leaks, and that is basically simple as it can be. Check where it leaks to give you an overview, or underview I should say, to where it leaks. Steering rack is a Cosworth specific, so make sure it doesn't have any excessive leaks or excessive play in it. It's not that easy, and neither is it cheap to repair. Do not be afraid if you see an upgraded cooling pack with an aluminum radiator like this, and even a larger intercooler. All depends on what you want with the car. Is it a museum object? You should find one with a plastic original intercooler, no radiator and stuff. But with these cooling systems being somewhat poor, an upgraded cooling system, and even if it looks standard like in satin black, I think it should be just a positive thing. So I think we should take the car down here now and maybe talk a bit about some crash history and some ending credits in a way. So hold on and see you in a second. Before we go, also check the fuel pump cradle. Very important. They always rust out, and fuel lines also. are maybe removed and put like A&N couplings and stuff on. So just make sure you check this area here, and also the fuel tank if it's rusty. You often find these aftermarket ones, which is pretty good quality, but they're not as good when it comes to the insides. They do have the swirl pot inside, but they can suffer from surging when turning hard on corners and stuff. If you're low on fuel, the car can surge, I've been told at least. So do take that into consideration when checking the car on the underside. So the car is back down here, and we're in for the ending talk session here, where I just want to vent some thoughts about the whole crash history thing and service history thing. That is obviously a very important thing. There's no denying that. But in some way, I've been thinking about that crash history thing. How important is it really? And the same with the service history. How important is it really? If you think about it, especially when it comes to crash history, if you can do a little parallel thinking there, if you as a person, either you or another person, experience something bad in your life, does that have to mean that you're a bad person, or that person is a bad person? No, it really doesn't. Obviously, it can mean that, but it doesn't have to. So the same goes with a car. It doesn't have to mean that it is a bad car because of it having a crash damage or even a non-existing service history. I mean, in some way, who cares what happened at the dealer 25 years ago? I mean, it's basically like replaceable parts they did something about anyways. And when the cars are that old they are today, I mean, an engine like this can be worn out or replaced anyway. But obviously, it is a cool thing to have a complete known history of a car. But in some way, it really doesn't matter if you put your goodwill to it in a way. And of course, I do say that in a way because I do not have a service history on this car. But again, you've seen the car now, and you can see the condition of it. And what really matters is the condition that the car is now. You know, the current condition is what you're buying. You're not buying an old service booklet, you know. But when it comes to crash history, obviously I do understand the car can be repaired poorly. It can have leaks that is a direct consequence of a car being like crooked, like not straight, and all that stuff. So, but then again, it just makes it even more important to do a proper inspection when you're going out to buying one of these, especially somewhat of a collector's item like these classic Ford Sierra Cosworths. And I think that's about it, people. I really don't want to exaggerate stuff here, and at least I got to show you some of the common issues that I feel is important to give an extra check when going out to buy one of these. And all the other stuff, like the tuning aspect, well, you have to decide whether you want a standard or tuned car. Just make sure that you're getting a proper, good example of either, and I guess you will be happy. So also the condition of or the crash history and service history, if you want that with the car, do make sure that you do check out the complete history so you get the car that you want. It will pay off in the end, both like the personal value, how you value the car, what you have the most enjoyment out of, but also like I'm not going to talk about more value. I mean, these cars are valuable. They are collector's items, no matter how you look at it. So it is important to get a good car so you will be happy with the ownership. Because when a car like this is in good condition. It's a fantastic car. It is an eye catcher. It always brings up a conversation when driving around, and I really enjoy that. It's not because of it being like you like the attention, so to speak, but it's cool because you get to talk to a lot of people that you might not talk to otherwise. So I think it's pretty cool, and it's cool to have a 60-year-old dude coming up to you and say, "Oh, I remember those cars." So it is cool in that on that side aspect also. So anyways, I'll wrap it up here, people. If you do have any questions, please leave a comment down below and I will be happy to get back to you there. So thank you again for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys in my future videos. So until then, I hope you have a great day, and see you guys later. Bye bye bye. See ya.